people on the plane noticed him the moment he boarded, not because he made noise, not because he carried anything strange, and not because he behaved oddly. No, people noticed him because of his hands. They were darkened with grease, smudged with old oil, the kind that stains the skin after hours of wrenching metal in a workshop. His knuckles were rough, the nails looked permanently stained, and the creases between his fingers were black like soot. Some of the passengers wrinkled their noses instantly, others whispered behind palms. A few even laughed, not quietly, but with the kind of mockery reserved for someone they believed was below them. To them, he was a man who didn't belong on this plane, on this route, in this cabin. A businessman in a crisp, tailored suit nudged his colleague. "Looks like someone walked straight out of a garage." His colleague snorted. "Hope he washed his hands before touching anything." A teenage boy across the row giggled loudly, while his mother scolded him with words but laughed with her eyes. The dirty-handed father, however, didn't react to any of it. He walked down the aisle with his old leather tool bag slung over his shoulder, its edges frayed and its zipper half broken. It looked out of place among the shiny suitcases and expensive backpacks. As he tried to lift it into the overhead bin, the zipper got stuck and he struggled with it for a moment. The businessman shook his head like he was watching a comedy. A flight attendant stepped over. Her smile was tight, not hostile but not kind either. The professional expression you give when you don't want to touch something or someone. "Sir, can I help you?" "No, thank you," he said softly, still tugging at the stubborn zipper. After a moment, it gave way, and he managed to shove the bag into the compartment. He wiped his hands on his jeans. Not that it made any difference. The stains were deep. He slid into his seat, the window seat near the back of the plane. People continued staring as if expecting him to pull out a wrench or grease the armrests, but he simply leaned back, exhaled, and put a hand over his chest pocket where he carried a small envelope. The edges were worn from being held too many times. Inside was something precious, something that kept him going through long nights and difficult days. His fingers brushed over it protectively, and for a moment, a soft smile tugged at his lips. A little girl sitting across the aisle noticed him. She had wide, innocent eyes and was coloring in a small notepad. She tilted her head curiously and smiled at him. He returned the smile gently, but before he could say a word, her mother pulled her closer. "Don't bother him," she muttered, but her eyes betrayed judgment. "Don't talk to people like that." He didn't take offense. He had faced worse in life, far worse. Minutes later, passengers settled, seatbelts clicked, overhead bins thudded shut, and the plane began taxiing. The businessman leaned into the aisle slightly to get one more look at him. "Can't believe he boarded like that," he whispered to the woman next to him. "At least clean up before flying." The woman sighed dramatically. "Some people just don't care about hygiene." The dirty-handed dad turned his face toward the window. Outside, the runway stretched endlessly, bathed in morning sunlight. He tapped his thumb lightly on the envelope, focusing on the rhythmic pattering to drown out the comments around him. As the plane lifted off the ground, engines roaring with power, he closed his eyes. For a moment, he allowed himself to drift, not to sleep, but to a memory. His daughter standing at the door, her tiny hands covered in purple marker, shoving the envelope into his hand before he left. "Daddy, don't forget. Read it when you feel alone." He promised her he would. The turbulence began soon after reaching altitude. At first it was the usual light shaking that made a few people grip the armrests, but then it intensified. The plane jolted harshly to the side, and a loud metallic groan echoed through the cabin. Nervous laughter erupted from several passengers, but it quickly turned to frantic chatter. Someone pressed the call button repeatedly. The lights flickered and the plane dipped as if losing balance. A woman screamed. A man shouted, "What's happening?" The flight attendant hurried down the aisle, her forced smile now replaced with genuine panic. Most passengers were terrified, but not the dirty-handed father. His eyes snapped open instantly, and his expression sharpened. He listened, not to the people, but to the plane itself. Another groan, a delayed flap movement, an uneven rumble under the wings. He wasn't a regular mechanic. He didn't fix cars or trucks or washing machines. He fixed machines that touched the sky. And something about this plane was wrong. The turbulence grew more violent. Even the usually calm flight attendants clung to the overhead compartments for balance. Drinks spilled, People cried. Baggage shifted with loud thuds above. Then came the alarm, a short, sharp, mechanical beep that few people recognized. But he did, instantly. It didn't belong in a calm cockpit. He sat forward, muscles tensing. He knew that sound. He had heard it countless times in simulation rooms, in testing hangars, in situations where a malfunction meant the difference between life and death for a pilot flying at Mach speed. This alarm meant hydraulic instability. He unbuckled his seatbelt. The businessman scoffed. "Now where does he think he's going?" Someone else muttered. "He better sit down before he causes more problems." But he stepped into the aisle anyway. The flight attendant saw him and panicked. "Sir, please sit down. This is dangerous." "There's a failure in the hydraulic line," he said, voice steady. "Did you see how long the flaps took to respond? And the pitch angle is—" "Sir, please," she repeated louder. "You need to sit down right now." He opened his mouth to explain again, but before he could, the cockpit door opened. Passengers gasped. Flight attendants froze. The CO pilot stepped out, pale and sweating, clutching the doorframe as if the cabin was spinning. "Is someone named Harris on board? A Mr. Daniel Harris?" The businessman turned, eyebrows raised. "Who?" The mother across the aisle blinked. "That dirty man?" Daniel lifted his hand slightly. "I'm Harris." The CO pilot's eyes widened with relief so intense it bordered on disbelief. "Sir, I can't believe it's really you." He swallowed hard. "We need your help, right now." The flight attendant's jaw dropped. Passengers exchanged confused looks. The businessman stared like someone had slapped him across the face. Daniel followed the CO pilot to the front, stepping past stunned faces and dropped jaws. A whisper floated through the cabin. "Who is he?" Another voice answered, trembling. Why does the CO pilot know him? The cockpit door closed behind him. Minutes passed. Long, silent minutes filled with fear, guilt, shame, and curiosity. People replayed the way they had judged him. The businessmen exchanged uncomfortable glances. A woman wiped her eyes, regret pooling in them. The flight attendants looked toward the cockpit repeatedly, waiting, hoping. Finally, the intercom buzzed. The pilot's voice came through, shaky but full of gratitude. "Ladies and gentlemen, we owe our safety today to a man many of you may not know, but every F-22 pilot in the country does." The cabin fell silent. The pilot continued, "Mr. Daniel Harris is the aeronautical engineer who designed parts of the hydraulic safety override system used in military aircraft. Today, he detected a critical failure in our own hydraulic system before it became catastrophic. He guided us through a manual recalibration that stabilized the aircraft." People covered their mouths. Some cried. The businessman hunched in his seat, unable to lift his head. The pilot finished, voice breaking slightly. "We survived because he was on board." And in that moment, the truth crashed over the passengers like a tidal wave. They had laughed at him, mocked him, judged him, all because of the grease on his hands, hands that built the systems keeping thousands of pilots alive. As the plane finally steadied and the sky outside calmed, passengers looked toward the front of the cabin with newfound respect. Some whispered apologies even though he couldn't hear them. Others stared at the floor, cheeks burning with shame. But Daniel didn't come out yet. He was still in the cockpit, quietly working, making sure every passenger would make it home safely. And with every passing minute, the weight of their misjudgment grew heavier. The plane had finally stabilized, but inside the cabin, tension still hung like a storm cloud. People whispered, not with the smug confidence they had earlier, but with trembling curiosity and guilt. They kept glancing toward the cockpit door, waiting for it to open, waiting to see the man they had mocked now revealed as someone far beyond what they assumed. But Daniel Harris didn't rush out. He remained in the cockpit, crouched beside the pilots, sleeves rolled up, hands moving with precision as he checked system data, recalibrated secondary pressure pathways, and monitored the readout displays. His fingers, those same grease-stained fingers people had judged, moved with a surgeon's delicacy. The captain breathed heavily beside him. "Sir, we're lucky you were here." Daniel shook his head. "Not luck. Good engineering." He pointed to the display. "This pressure line's out of sync with the regulator. That's why you had delayed control response." The CO pilot exchanged glances with the captain. "We couldn't identify it. The system wasn't giving us the warning indicators we expected." "It wouldn't," Daniel said. This type of failure hides behind stable readings until it becomes catastrophic. I've seen it happen before in simulation models." He didn't elaborate. They didn't need to know that the last time he saw this malfunction, the pilot never returned home. A sharp beep interrupted the tension. Daniel looked up. "There. Pressure is normalizing. You should be stable now." The captain exhaled, long and shaky. "Mr. Harris, thank you." "Truly." Daniel nodded and stood. The pilots followed him to the door. The CO pilot opened it gently, almost reverently. "Would you like me to announce anything else?" the captain asked behind him. "No," Daniel said softly. "You already said enough. Let the passengers feel safe again." He stepped back into the cabin. Every head turned. The same man they laughed at earlier now stood before them, shoulders broadened with quiet confidence, eyes sharp but calm, and hands still stained with grease, but now glowing with undeniable purpose. A hush fell over the entire aircraft. Passengers didn't just look at him, they stared as if seeing him for the first time. Daniel walked back to his seat slowly. He didn't avoid their eyes, nor did he look for approval. He just walked, and with every step, the guilt on their faces deepened. The businessman who had mocked him earlier suddenly stood from his seat. His face was red, and he was swallowing hard. "Sir, Mr. Harris, I didn't know." Daniel nodded once without anger. "Most people don't. It's all right, but those things I said I didn't mean." "You meant them at the time," Daniel said, but not unkindly. "It's okay. Just remember this moment next time you see someone who looks different from what you expect." The businessman sat down, face crumpled with regret. The little girl across the aisle peeked at him again. Her mother's expression had changed completely, no longer judgmental, but embarrassed. She gently nudged her daughter. "Sweetie, say thank you." The girl smiled brightly. "Thank you, mister." Daniel's heart softened. "You're welcome." He sat down, exhaling heavily, not from exhaustion, but from the emotional weight of the moment. His hand went to his pocket again, touching the envelope. Something inside him eased when he felt it. He didn't open it. Just holding it was enough for now. As the flight continued, the cabin slowly regained a semblance of normalcy, though no one truly relaxed. People kept sneaking glances at Daniel, as if fearing he might disappear if they looked away. About 20 minutes later, the flight attendant, now clearly nervous, approached him. "Sir, Mr. Harris, the captain would like to offer you a seat in first class for the remainder of the flight. It's the least we can do." Daniel shook his head. "Thanks, but I'm fine here. But sir," he offered a small smile, "these seats work. And besides, I'm close to the wing here. Easier to listen if something goes wrong." The attendant seemed confused, but nodded respectfully before hurrying away. The woman in the seat next to him, who earlier pulled her daughter away from him as if he were contagious, now turned with trembling hands. "Mr. Harris, I'm so sorry for judging you. I swear I'm not usually like that." Daniel looked at her gently. "Fear makes us forget ourselves sometimes, but you weren't dirty at all, not the way we thought." He laughed softly. "I was dirty. I am dirty. That grease has been on my hands for years. Comes with the job." "What exactly do you do?" she asked, eyes full of curiosity rather than judgment. He paused, then spoke quietly. "I designed the hydraulic safety systems on F-22 Raptors. I worked with the Air Force for years, but tools, machines, engines, they're my real work." The woman's mouth fell open. "You built fighter jets?" "No," he corrected. "I built the parts that keep pilots alive when everything else fails." A few people around them heard and leaned closer. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" someone asked from the row behind. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Should I have announced it while I boarded?" People chuckled awkwardly. The man continued, "I mean, you saved us. We owe you." Daniel shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time." But the people didn't look convinced. They exchanged glances, deeply humbled, deeply moved. Time passed as the plane cut through the sky. Daniel looked out the window, watching clouds drift by like slow-moving mountains. His mind wandered to the workshop, to the hangars where he had spent nights tightening bolts and calibrating lines so perfectly that pilots trusted their lives to his hands, to the colleagues who had used clean gloves while he chose to work barehanded because he liked feeling the metal, the vibration, the heartbeat of the machine, Most of all, his mind wandered to Emma, his daughter. She was the one who always told him, "Daddy, your hands look dirty but feel warm." She was the one who never judged him, who saw him as a hero long before anyone else did. He reached into his pocket and gently pulled out the envelope. The paper was creased from constant handling, but the childish rainbow-colored sticker on the back still stuck firmly. He opened it carefully. Inside was a small card with a hand-drawn picture of an airplane. Stick figures stood underneath it, one tall, one short. The little one held the big one's hand with the words scribbled in uneven handwriting. "You fixed the sky. You fixed the world. You're my hero, Dad." Daniel blinked rapidly as his vision shimmered. He ran his thumb over the drawing, the lines uneven, the crayons smudged. This was why he worked, why he built machines that touched the clouds, why he risked everything to perfect systems that kept people alive. His daughter believed in him, always had. Now, for the first time, a plane full of strangers had seen a glimpse of what she saw every day. The turbulence had faded completely, but the captain made an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're approaching our destination. Prepare for descent." People straightened in their seats, but the mood remained heavy with unspoken emotion. They knew what had almost happened, and they knew who had prevented it. As the plane began its slow descent, the businessman leaned toward Daniel again. "Sir, may I ask something?" Daniel nodded. "You said you designed the hydraulic safety system for the F-22. Then why are you flying commercial? Why aren't you working with the Air Force anymore?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. He looked ahead, expression thoughtful. "I retired," he said softly. "My wife passed away 2 years ago. I needed more time for my daughter. She's 6 now. I pick her up from school every day. I cook dinner. I fix broken toys instead of broken machines." The businessman swallowed. "That's admirable." "No," Daniel whispered. "It's necessary. She lost her mother. I won't let her lose me to my work." The passengers listening went silent, touched. The woman across the aisle said, "Then why were you traveling today, if you're retired?" Daniel looked at the envelope again. "A former Air Force commander asked me to come inspect new safety systems for the Raptors. Said they needed my eyes on it. I said no at first, but Emma told me heroes help people, so I'm going." And with those simple words, the passengers understood something profound. Daniel Harris wasn't just an engineer. He was a father, a protector, a quiet guardian of the skies. The plane descended smoothly. Wheels touched down with a gentle thud. No jerking, no alarms, no chaos. As the engines slowed and the plane taxied toward the gate, people burst into applause. But the applause wasn't for the landing. It was for the man with grease-stained hands who had saved their lives. And as the aircraft rolled to a stop, none of them had any idea that the moment they stepped outside, something extraordinary awaited. Something that would change the way they saw him forever. The applause faded slowly, replaced by the hum of the plane's engines winding down. But even after the passengers stopped clapping, the energy in the cabin remained thick with awe. Daniel kept his eyes lowered, embarrassed by the attention. He hadn't done any of it for praise. He simply did what he had always done. Listen to machines the way other people listen to music, feel their tremors, their hesitations, their silent warnings. It was instinct. As the seatbelt sign switched off, people stayed seated, watching him instead of rushing for the aisle like usual. A few murmured things, thank yous, apologies, admiration, but nobody wanted to crowd him. He appreciated the space. After all, he wasn't a man who enjoyed the spotlight. He just wanted to get off the plane, call his daughter, and tell her he'd arrived safely. But fate had different plans. The flight attendant approached him again, this time with genuine warmth and awe in her eyes. "Mr. Harris, the ground crew is asking if you could step off the plane first." Daniel frowned. "Why?" They didn't say, but it seemed important. He wasn't used to people requesting him for anything outside engineering rooms and hangars. But he nodded and stood. His tool bag from the overhead bin sagged heavily in his hand, familiar, comforting weight. As he moved toward the exit, passengers parted on both sides, creating a narrow aisle like a guard of honor. Some bowed their heads in respect. Some pressed their hands together. The businessman, who had mocked him earlier, gave a shaky salute, his eyes glossy with shame. Daniel didn't hold any grudge. People judge quickly, but they learn slowly. At least they were learning. He stepped out of the plane. Then he froze. Parked just beyond the glass windows of the terminal were two F-22 Raptors, sleek, predatory, beautiful machines that dominated the sky. Their metallic bodies glimmered in the sunlight, standing out like winged giants waiting for something or someone. But it wasn't the jets alone that stunned him. It was the row of Air Force officers standing on the tarmac in crisp uniforms, hats tucked under their arms, their medals shining. At the front of the formation stood a 4-star general, a woman with sharp eyes and a stance so solid it looked carved from granite. As soon as Daniel stepped onto the ramp, the general raised her hand. Every officer snapped to attention. Then came the unmistakable sound, boots clicking against concrete in perfect unison as they saluted him. Daniel stopped mid-step, heart thundering. They weren't saluting the plane. They weren't saluting the passengers. They were saluting him. The general approached, her expression solemn yet warm. "Mr. Harris, the United States Air Force welcomes you, and we honor you." "General," he breathed, stunned. This isn't necessary. You saved over 100 civilians today," she said firmly. "And more than that, you've saved countless pilots over the years with your work." Her voice softened. "You built the systems that kept my people alive. You saved my wingman 3 years ago during a hydraulic failure over the Pacific. Your name is spoken in every hangar, in every training room, in every aircraft maintenance center. You are a legend to our pilots." Daniel swallowed hard. He had never once thought of himself that way. He simply did what he was good at. He didn't seek fame. He didn't seek honor. He just wanted to keep people alive. The general took a step forward. The two F-22s behind her roared to life for a brief moment, engines powering up just enough to echo through the terminal. Then, in perfect synchronicity, the jets dipped their noses, an aviation salute reserved for the highest honor. Passengers inside the terminal pressed their hands to the windows in disbelief. Some cried openly. Some recorded the moment with shaking hands. And some stood frozen, realizing that the man they had mocked on the plane was being honored by the very defenders of the nation's sky. Daniel wiped his palms on his jeans again, though no amount of wiping would ever remove the stains fully. The general extended her hand. "Mr. Harris, the Air Force would like to officially recognize your service, past and present. We also have a transport ready if you'd like an escort to your evaluation briefing. But before that," she stepped aside. A car door opened. Out stepped a small girl with ponytails and wide, excited eyes. "Daddy!" Emma ran toward him full speed, arms spread wide. Daniel dropped his bag instantly and fell to his knees, catching her in a fierce embrace. She wrapped her arms around his neck, giggling into his shoulder. "Daddy, I saw the planes, they're so loud." He laughed, breath shaky. "What are you doing here? You were supposed to be at Grandma's." "The general sent a car to pick me up," she exclaimed proudly. "She said heroes shouldn't walk alone." Daniel felt his throat tighten. The general smiled. "I hope you don't mind. Your daughter insisted she needed to greet you as soon as you landed." Tears stung Daniel's eyes, and he pulled Emma closer. "You drew me a picture before I left," he whispered. "I kept it with me." "I knew you would," she said happily. "Mommy said you always kept my drawings." He held her even tighter. The general cleared her throat softly. "Mr. Harris, we have one more request." Daniel stood with Emma in his arms. "Yes? We'd like your permission to feature your work and story in our pilot trainings. Our young aviators deserve to know the man behind the systems that protect them. Your story could save more lives." Daniel blinked rapidly. I don't know what to say." Emma tugged his shirt. "Say yes, Daddy. Mommy always said your hands made magic." Daniel laughed through his tears. "Then yes," he said. The officers saluted again. The general gestured toward the jets. "Before we take you to your briefing, our pilots want to offer one more honor." The two F-22 Raptors began to roll, engines humming, wings gleaming. People gathered near the windows, stunned into silence. Both jets accelerated slowly, then leaped into a synchronized takeoff. They rose into the sky with perfect symmetry, banking in a wide arc before dipping into a wing salute, a rare maneuver reserved only for those the pilots truly respected. The thunder of their engines vibrated through the ground, through the air, through every heart watching. Emma gasped. "They bowed at you, Daddy." Daniel placed a hand on her head. "No," he whispered. "They bowed at what we built together, all of us. Engineers, pilots, mechanics. Every person touches the sky through someone else's work. Emma hugged him again, resting her chin on his shoulder. But they saluted you too. Daniel smiled as he looked at the sky. Maybe. The general stepped beside him. Mr. Harris, you spent your life building systems that save people. Today, you live to see the impact of that work. This isn't just your achievement, it's your legacy. Daniel nodded slowly, overwhelmed. For years, he had worked silently in the shadows, bending over metal, bleeding through gloves, tightening bolts with precision only he truly understood. For years, he had been overlooked, underestimated, judged for the stains on his hands, but never recognized for the brilliance in them. But today, the world saw him. Not as a mechanic, not as a man with dirty hands, not as someone passengers smirked at on a plane. Today he was seen as he truly was. A guardian of the skies, a protector of lives, a father, a hero. The general placed a hand on his shoulder. Let's take you home, Mr. Harris. You've earned it. He picked up his old tool bag, tightened his arm around Emma, and walked with the officers as the crowd watched in reverent silence. The jets circled once more overhead, roaring through the sky like thunderous guardians saluting one final time. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel Harris walked forward not as the man nobody noticed, but as the man everyone would remember.